all by myself. Self. This video is going to be all about what spiritual teachers have said regarding the self. What is the self? Specifically, two statements I've heard, really, spiritual teachers have made. One of those statements being, in a state of total awareness, there is no self. The self dissolves. So we're going to question that. I'm going to question that, sorry. And also, I've heard another spiritual teacher say, or a few spiritual teachers say, that there's a difference between the mind and the self. So I'm going to question that as well. So let's start with, in a state of total awareness, there is no self. That statement. Again, I've heard that statement made by a few spiritual teachers, and I don't totally agree with it. And so look, first of all, what is total awareness? I spoke about this in other videos, but just in case you haven't heard my previous ramblings, total awareness basically means just to be totally aware. You know, aware of the world around you, as well as all the goings on within you. Or in other words, totally aware of what you can see, hear, smell, and totally aware of the thoughts that are coming and going. You know, the taste in your mouth, maybe the feelings within your body. Totally aware, all at once, not separately, not concentrating on what you're thinking or concentrating on some. Just totally aware. Other spiritual teachers might refer to it as being totally present. You might have heard that. Being totally present, or being here and now, totally here and now, or being totally at one with the world. That's another one. You might have heard that. I just call it being totally aware. Total awareness. So, now, certain spiritual teachers I've heard have said that in that state, there's no self. So, what is the self? Two descriptions. First, my description. My description is the mind, your mind, however you want to say it. The mind is the self. The self is the mind. You are your mind. You are your brain, in other words. You know, I've said that in a previous video. Everything which makes you you is your mind, is your brain. The brain and the mind are the same thing. The brain is the physical matter. If a doctor cut off your head, they'd be able to remove your brain, but the mind is the strange spirit, as we conventionally call it, within the brain. The mind is within the brain. So you are that. And what I mean by that is, your name's John, let's say. Your name's John, you lose your leg. Providing you get adequate medical attention, you're still John, but with one leg. You understand? If you lose your arm, again, providing you get adequate medical attention, you can still be John with one arm and one leg, or minus one arm, one leg, however you want to say it. You understand what I'm saying? But if your brain goes, your brain gets destroyed, in other words, there's no you, because the mind goes with it. You are your mind. You understand what I'm saying? You are your mind. You are your brain. The mind is the self. You with me? So, in a state of total awareness, spiritual teachers have said there is no self. The self dissolves. Well, how can that be true? If we go on my description of what I just said, how can that be true? That would mean you die. You know what I'm saying? But so there's always a self. There's always a self until the day you physically die and the brain dies. There's always a self. Now, a conventional spiritual teacher's, I told you there was two descriptions of the self. That was my description. a conventional spiritual teacher's description of the self is the self being all your memories, your opinions, your likes, your dislikes, your judgments. I like this, I that. That when you say I, that's what they refer to as being, excuse me, the self, you know, born of memory, knowledge, all of that. So, and they say in a state of total awareness, there's no self. Now, if we go off of that explanation, that description, of the self, then yes, that is true. You know, your thought comes to an end. You know, there's no judgment, there's no opinions, likes or dislikes. There's just, in a state of total awareness, there's just perception of what is, in other words. You know, there's no, all your likes and dislikes, opinions, judgments, all that just comes to an end. So yes, that is true. But knowledge is always in operation, so it can't completely, there can never be no self. There can never be no self, going on what I've said anyway, but there can never be no self in the sense that there is no knowledge in operation. Knowledge is always in operation. How am I talking to this camera now? Because knowledge, if knowledge of how to speak, I wouldn't be able to speak. I wouldn't even be able to sit upright on this chair, because take it back to being a baby. A baby, when a baby is first born, the baby doesn't even know how to roll over onto its hands and knees, crawl around, walk. The baby can't do none of that. It can lay there and make involuntary actions, but movement is learnt, which is knowledge. Movement is learnt, which implies knowledge. So there can never be complete dissolving of knowledge, because that's nonsense. Knowledge is always in operation. You understand? But yes, I do agree in some sense what the spiritual teacher is saying. When you're if you ever been in a state of when you're just totally aware, totally present, whatever you want to call it, totally here and now, at one with the world, however you put it. Yes, thought, opinions, likes, judgments, all that comes to an end. Okay, now, the other statement I wanted to refer to at the start of this video I mentioned was that I'd heard a spiritual teacher, or a couple of spiritual teachers, say that there's a difference between the mind and the self. That's complete nonsense. How can there be? The mind is the self. If you've heard all of what I've said and it rings true to you, not just intellectually, oh, yeah, I hear what you're saying, yeah, that makes sense. No, if you really see what I'm saying, how can there be a difference between the mind and the self? You understand? Let me put it to you this way. If there was a difference between the mind and the self, because I've heard, again, a couple of spiritual teachers saying the mind is the mind creates all the problems within, you know, all your anxieties, it does, but it's actually, to be more specific, it's thought that creates all the conflicts within, you know, the way you think, because thought affects your feelings. Thought is an element of the mind, so it's wrong. It's wrong to say the mind. I've said it in previous videos, but I'm going to be more specific with my words now. So, but to say there's a difference between the self and the mind is wrong. I'm going to end it on this. If the mind and the self were different, and the mind was causing you all these problems, oh, my mind's working overtime, my mind's really, you know, I want to, but my mind won't let me. You've dissociated yourself from your mind. Save up some money, go to the doctors and say to the doctor, "Doctor, please remove my mind. and just leave me with myself. Leave me with the self and remove the mind, because I just can't stop thinking it's this and that. The doctor would just look at you like you're mad. You can't. You are your mind. You remove the mind, the brain in other words, again, you're a dead body, you're a corpse. So there's no difference between the self and the mind. You understand what I'm saying? Thought is an element of the mind. Yes, the mind does wander inwardly, not the. You understand what I'm saying? Like a car goes fast, but it doesn't really go fast. The wheels spin round really fast, which make the car move. But without the wheels, the car doesn't move at all. You understand what I'm saying? The wheels are an element of the car. Thought is an element of the mind. And it's thought that runs rampant. Thought that... You understand what I'm saying? The phone's ringing. Gonna have to answer that. All the best. I hope this makes some sense. Is there such a thing as being totally aware? Live your life and see. Is there such a thing? All the best. Take care.